WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 36, all about The Window of the West, Chapter 5, Book 4 of the Two Towers, being the 36th part of That's What I'm Talking About. 36th is a hard word to say. 36th. 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 Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. And today I'm joined by Buddy Duquesne of Those Happy Places. Welcome back, Buddy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's me. I'm Buddy Duquesne. I host a show called Those Happy Places about theme parks, rides, and attractions, and we treat them like literature. So we treat them with the same import that we will today be treating the great works of J.R.R. Tolkien. So really excited to be here.
Yeah, and you guys also just finished doing your daily podcast, The Joust, which I just started listening to the first couple episodes, and it's really fun. I'm enjoying it. Tell the listeners a little bit about that too.
Yeah, The Joust is a show that myself and my co-host Alice White, who is also on Those Happy Places, we decided we were going to do this daily podcast every day in the month of February, because February is the shortest month. So if you're going to do anything for a month, you should do it for the month of February.
And it's also funny that you said that, but you guys also happened to pick it on a leap year where it was one day longer.
Not only was February longer, but we did an episode 0 on January 31st, and we did a wrap party on March 1st. So we ended up doing 31 days of this podcast, which we were such fools. But it's really cool. It's a fantasy sports cast from the kingdom of Caliano, which is exactly the size and shape of California.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Right? And it follows the stories of these 4 knights that are in this tournament. And I play Buddy of House Duquesne, which is a person that's a bit like me, but not really like me. And Alice plays Alice of House White, which is a character that is a bit like her, but not really like her. And we commentate what happens during the tournament. It was a blast. It was really fun.
Very cool. Very cool. So this chapter is chapter 5. Oh, also, listeners and Buddy, I apologize profusely. I have a bad cold and or allergies. I'm not sure which, but I probably will sound like stuffy and congested, and I will also probably be sniffing and clearing my throat a lot, and I'm probably not gonna edit all of that out, so apologies in advance.
Who can edit around all of that? Yeah.
Yes, so this chapter, The Window on the West. So I feel awful. I feel like a bad podcast host of this podcast because I've been dreading this chapter for a while because I did a really quick flip through a couple weeks ago just to see how long each chapter was. And I specifically remember that this one was 20 pages, which is a lot longer than the 10 to 15 pages the rest of these chapters have been. So I was dreading it for that, but also because, y'all, I really do not like this book right now.
Oh no, why? What happened?
I do not like Sam. I do not like Frodo. I do not like Gollum. And I'm really glad Faramir is here. I will say that. Like, I'm so thankful Faramir is here for at least like a change of pace. And like, I really, really hope that it gets better. But I'm telling myself that like, this is just the really annoying, like angsty part of like Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that you have to trudge through in order to get to like the rest of the good stuff.
This has some book 5 vibes. Yeah. Let me see if I can help, because I loved this chapter, and I loved like returning to it and this moment in the story and all of the psychology that's happening here. And yes, I love Faramir, but I love Frodo in this chapter. And I actually kind of love Sam in this chapter. So I'm excited about all of it. I'm not excited about Gollum in this chapter.
Yeah. Who thankfully isn't really there. Like, as usual, he's just kind of skulking in the background. But yeah, thankfully he's not there. I'm glad that you're excited, because I think it wouldn't be a good episode if I had on someone who like also hated this chapter, because then it would just be an hour of us just being sad about it. So I'm glad that you are able to show your enthusiasm for this part of the story.
Yes, definitely. And I think I'm also being helped by the fact that I remember this scene in the film, and the scene in the film is quite good and a lot like this scene. But it doesn't have quite the depth of internal monologue. So
oh my gosh.
reading
the internal monologues.
Does but reading it and having an idea of what's happening in these characters' heads and why they're saying what they're saying, instead of just having to like read the faces of the actors, has really kind of opened up this interaction for me. And now I'm like, Frodo is a genius. He's such a great diplomat. And Faramir, he has so much more going on than you think he does. And even Sam, despite the fact that I think Tolkien's doing Sam a little dirty in this chapter, because he's like, well, I might just be a simple gardener, sir. And there's a lot of that. And they keep saying that Sam is simple and not as smart as Frodo. And like, that really hurts my feelings for poor Sam. But I do actually like some of what Sam manages to pull off in terms of being a great companion to Frodo and standing up for himself against Faramir especially. And it's just so bold of him and so admirable. So I'm stoked for it.
That's good. I'm glad one of us can be excited. So this chapter picks up, so where I always feel like I'm like a old-timey radio drama series host, like in the 50s, where it's like, where we last left our heroes, they were, and anyway, so where we last left our heroes, they were about to go to sleep. Surprise, surprise. And Faramir's two guards, I don't even remember their names. It was like Dunlop and Sadrack. I don't know.
Who can remember these things?
Okay, Mablung and Damrod, which was not far off, I think, from what I said. Anyway, they had told Sam, they're like, oh, Faramir's definitely not just gonna, like, let you guys go off on your own. He needs to talk with you guys about whatever you're doing here. And that's what Sam wakes up to. Except for, he wakes up to, like, I think it's, like, 200 or 300 men who were fighting in this army, or in this battle, are all standing around watching Frodo and Faramir talk. And Sam notes that it's almost like someone is on trial. And I'm like, that's just like a really disorienting thing to wake up to like wake up and then turn around and there's like 200 people staring at your friend and their captain having a conversation.
Right, and it's not just a conversation, it's like an interrogation. Like,
oh, yeah.
Faramir's like, what are you doing here? Who are you?
Yeah, and that's the tricky part about a lot of this chapter is Frodo does not want to reveal that they have the ring. And like he doesn't want to talk about it at all. He's assuming that they don't even know what this thing is. He doesn't want to reveal their mission in case there is some like foul play going on, right, where it could put the ring in danger or put them in danger somehow. So it's really hard for him to be like to explain why they've gone on this long journey without providing the reason. Because if you think about it from Faramir's perspective, it's two hobbits out in the middle of nowhere for no reason at all. That makes zero sense. And then also, like, they were friends with your brother who is dead. Like,
right. That's a big drop in the middle of this chapter right
yeah,
here.
I gasped. But okay, so we'll get to that in a second. But yes, Faramir is asking him what's up with this? What are you doing? And I was like, you know what? Good on you, Faramir, for asking the questions that need to be asked and not just blindly trusting random people you come across in the woods. There should be more characters in works of fiction that are like Faramir, where they go on like full-on interrogations, basically, when they come across new people.
Right, and Faramir is a reasonable guy being asked to do a very unreasonable thing, which is defend Gondor with ever-dwindling resources against a basically infinite enemy, right? So he's on this like patrol that has him and his men fighting almost constantly. They're all these battle-hardened ranger types, but they're not rangers. That is a important distinction. But they're all like sneaking through the forest, and they're basically Robin Hood and his merry men, but an organized army as well, which is amazing. I love Faramir and his gang for that. But, you know, he doesn't know what halflings are, he admits later in the chapter.
Yeah, like none of these people that they come across on this journey know what hobbits are. And I think that's so funny because, like, at least in my mind, I imagine that, like, everyone else that the hobbits meet knows so much more than the hobbits do, but they never seem to know that the hobbits are real things and not just these things from stories.
Right. And that's great for the story for like two reasons, because like reason number one, it leaves the hobbits like isolated and they're this like pure idyllic idea of what simple folk can be like, but also it lets characters explain things to them. So yes. Like I can't believe we're this deep into Lord of the Rings and Faramir's like, maybe you know him, he has many names, and then he names off like the 9 names of Gandalf. Yeah. And it's like, no, we know Gandalf.
We know that old geezer.
But he wouldn't do that to an elf. He wouldn't do that to another man. He has to do it to hobbits. He has to kind of talk down at them. And then we get these long descriptions of history and stuff to go along with it.
Yeah. There's like so much backstory and everything in this chapter that he goes into like unprompted.
Oh yeah.
But we'll get there when we get there. So yeah, so they're telling him, Frodo is kind of half telling where they were and who they were with and what their purpose is. And also I should mention that at this point, so we, the reader, know that Boromir is dead. Frodo and Sam do not. And at this point, we also, at the start of this chapter, we also think that Faramir does not know Boromir is dead. Right. Which we find out later he does know. Anyway, so they're talking about all of this, and they talk about how when Gandalf died, Frodo named Aragorn the leader, and I just thought it was funny because Faramir said, "Why not Boromir?" And I was like, oh, for so many reasons. For so many reasons is why it was not Boromir, but he doesn't know. Also, sorry, I'm just realizing that like the last time you were on the podcast, I think we had just met Boromir. And
yes, we were on the Council of Elrond episode.
You should know that I have had a full range of emotions regarding Boromir since you were last on. And
I bet that this chapter made it a little more complicated even.
Not really. I was mostly just like, wow, Faramir's the best. And
Faramir is the good one. Boromir is garbage, but also nice, but garbage.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. So Faramir's a good brother. He holds Boromir up in this high regard. And I laughed at this too. He asks Frodo if he was a friend of Boromir. And it says, vividly before Frodo's mind came the memory of Boromir's assault upon him. And for a moment he hesitated. So I love this picture of Faramir talking to Frodo, and it's a really intense conversation, and all these people are watching. He's like, so, were you a friend of Boromir? And then there's just like,
and then like yeah.
Yeah,
we were companions. I knew him well.
It's like, you could say that. Sure. Yeah, we were the best friends.
I mean, okay, so Boromir, you know, he falls into temptation and he's very quickly punished in the story for it. What you say? But what I love about Faramir in this scene is that he doesn't react to anything the way you think he might or should. And upon finding out that there was a falling out, I mean, he takes it quite well. He's like, yes, oh, my brother. True. I mean, well, when he admits that Boromir's his brother, that's a huge reveal.
Yeah.
But when he's like, yeah, Boromir, yeah, he used to really love fighting, and he loved his own glory and stuff like that. So you could see where there were these seeds, even with people that he knew before he joined the Fellowship.
Yeah.
Where he was like, Yeah, I mean, like, he's a great guy, but sometimes he's a little, needlessly arrogant or a little too obsessed with fighting.
Later on, Faramir described him as often rash and ever anxious, and I was like, that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that's Boromir.
I mean, and that's the sort of thing that only a brother could say about a brother, or at least a very good friend, right?
Yeah.
And I still loved him for it is like a whole part of what he's saying there. So that's great. And I think what's also great is that Frodo is not going to say anything bad about Boromir, even before Faramir's like, oh, that was my brother. He's like, oh, I'm not going to speak ill of him. These are men of Gondor. Boromir was a prince. Like, oh, Boromir, great guy. Never betrayed me.
Loved him. Yeah, definitely. We definitely didn't have a weird falling out that was the catalyst for me leaving our group. Yeah, definitely didn't happen.
Never happened.
So then this is where Faramir reveals that Boromir is dead because he's saying like, oh, so you're a friend, so then that must mean you're very sad to learn that he's dead. And Frodo's like, yeah, we would be sad that he's dead if he was dead. And then he's like, wait a minute, he's dead? How did that happen?
It's almost a spit take from Frodo, the way it's delivered. He's like, of course, I would be so sad. He's dead?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. This is, even though Frodo and Boromir's last interaction was not the best, to put it lightly.
Right.
It's definitely still a very startling thing for them to learn, because they're also wondering, like, well, if he's dead, they kind of, like, go down this rabbit hole of, like, well, if he's dead, then surely that means that everyone else is dead. And
right. Boromir wouldn't be the only one to die. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Surely they all died.
Yeah, that's not what happened at all. And yeah, of course, we the readers know that everyone is alive except for Boromir.
Right. But it does affect Frodo and Sam pretty deeply. Like, they spend a lot of this chapter being like, I can't believe everybody else, all 7 of them, they're all dead, huh?
Yeah,
wow.
They're like, wow,
oh
who would have thought? It's that, once again, it's that Paul Rudd meme of like, wow, look at us, who would have thought?
Look at us. Hey, look at us. Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
Yeah, they think that they're like the sole survivors now of the Fellowship. LOL, little do they know.
But that's great for this chapter too, because now Frodo's like, I am the only one in charge of the ring. Like,
yeah,
Aragorn's not in charge anymore. I was like lying to myself a little bit about somebody else had responsibility. And now Frodo's completely isolated in this. And, like, he doesn't really trust Sam to be in charge. Maybe rightfully so.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I get to choose who knows what about this, and I have to play my cards very close to my chest, and anything I say has to serve the mission. Starting now.
It's funny you say that, because there are a lot of things that Sam says in this chapter that do not serve the mission.
He's so bumbling in this.
Case in point, so they're talking about Boromir's death, and Faramir's trying to, like, figure out what happened, because from Faramir's perspective, all they know is that Boromir showed up dead in a boat.
And maybe it was a dream, and maybe it wasn't, and nobody stopped the boat to find out.
Frodo tries to, like, gaslight him, and it's like, oh, it was a dream. Because surely everyone else in our group was dead, so who could have put him in a boat? Anyway, so they're trying to, like, piece together what could have happened, and Frodo, of course, doesn't really want to reveal that Boromir had tried to, like, cross him and take the ring and went all evil for a minute. And then Sam jumps in and says, if you think my master murdered this Boromir and then ran away, you've got no sense. And I'm like, Sam, literally
Sam,
no
please.
one was suggesting that. No, it's like, oh, I see what's happening here. You think I murdered Boromir. It's like, well, I mean, I do now.
Right, you put that in his head.
Exactly.
Sam is his temper definitely gets the better of him. First his temper, then I guess he just gets too comfy later in the chapter. He's just too comfy around these guys, and he just drinks a little and starts talking, and he lets it slip that they have the one ring. And Frodo's like, "What?
Yeah.
All that work?"
And even Sam is like, oh no. He has like a Hagrid moment. I shouldn't have said that.
I should not have said that. And he does. And then he stands up and he's like, you know what? If you want to kill us and take the ring, you're going to have to go through me. I warn you, I'm a gardener. Like, watch out. Which is great for Sam there, too.
These dumb hobbits. So, throughout this conversation / interrogation, this is when we learned that Faramir is Boromir's brother. And I legitimately gasped. I was like, oh my god, they're brothers? Which I should have known.
Great?
Their names are Boromir and Faramir. It should have... That's, like, pretty connected, so...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, though, how many of Tolkien's characters have similar-sounding names and no relation? I mean...
This is also true.
The dude has naming conventions that he just ignores. But Boromir and Faramir, I mean, that one's obvious unless you've been reading his books. And then you're like, there's just two guys named Mir, whatever.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my god, no, Faramir, you can't be related to Boromir. Please don't be related to Boromir. But throughout this chapter, I was like, oh, I see. Faramir got, like, the rational genes and the level-headed genes and the thinking clearly, strategic thinking genes in the family, and Boromir got like, I'm gonna go fight with my sword and blow my horn and I'm gonna win this battle.
Yeah, definitely. And Faramir is definitely... Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. This is my big thesis statement for this episode. Not to spoil too much, but you and I both know that Aragorn is the de facto protagonist, right?
What?
I mean, he is the true king, and everybody knows it.
So there was a Twitter thread that went viral a couple months ago that imagined Lord of the Rings as a D&D campaign.
Right.
And it described the first half of this book as the side quest. And I was like, no. The Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf story is not the side quest. Like, in my mind, that's the main story.
Right. That's totally what... I mean, like, Frodo destroying the ring is kind of almost its own thing. Like, they're very separate in terms of grand scale, but I think that's on purpose, right? Because, like, greatness can come from anywhere, and greatness comes from your lineage, are, like, both happening in this Tolkien story. So, it's fun. I like it. But, like, Aragorn, let's just say that he's, like, the Harry Potter of this series. Like, our main guy, chosen one, gonna save the world. I believe Faramir is Neville Longbottom.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I think if Aragorn were to fall, Faramir would be the true hero of men, and I have the text here to prove it.
I mean, I literally have only known Faramir for like 1 1/4 of a chapter, and I believe you wholeheartely. So
definitely, like you get the sense maybe that Faramir was always quieter, more careful, a little bit in the background. Maybe he was never as awkward or as clumsy as Neville Longbottom, but being the second brother of not even actually a kingdom, because they're like stewards of Gondor, right? They're not the kings of Gondor. Being the second brother has forced him to be a bit more careful, but I believe he has all the qualities of a uniting leader of men. He's just in the wrong place for it, and he could be elevated to that. I mean, he shows no desire for the ring when he knows, before he knows it's the One Ring. He's like, oh no, I would never use a weapon of the enemy. Yeah. Like, we could never. And then when he finds out it's the One Ring, he's like, nope, same principle. Like, no way. Would never do that. It must be destroyed. I will help you however I can. And that's just great. I love this guy. So level-headed, so steady, and just so proud of what he does. And you can tell that his men are the same way. Like, he gathers everybody around to hold this mock trial, if you will. And then when they move together, they all move as one through the forest into their hideout cave, where everybody works together kind of in unison to continue to preserve the safety and secret of the hideout, but also to do everything. And it's just very equal and good. And there's this sense of a big important thing happening, but they're in reality just this little band of men doing their best. I find that to be really, really inspiring, actually. Faramir rocks.
Yeah.
And even finding out that Boromir did a bad thing, he has the chance there to be like, you guys are lying about my brother. You're spreading rumors. Boromir was the best. He could do that. And he could have the hobbits murdered, kidnapped, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you guys are right. He was kind of a jerk.
Yeah, and that's what Frodo and Sam are afraid of throughout this whole chapter, and that's why Frodo is hiding this, and also kind of also hiding the truth about what happened with Boromir, is because they're like, if we tell him that we kind of sort of hate his brother, and if we tell him about this like powerful ring that his brother was after, it's over for us. We have to play this super carefully. We can't reveal what happened with Boromir because that's the only thing that we've connected over so far. And if we revealed the truth, then who knows what'll happen. Yeah, and it's just so amazing to see Faramir do like the exact opposite of frankly what like I think he would totally like. I wouldn't be like, oh, Faramir's totally in the wrong if he were to, you know, accuse them of lying or start, you know, fighting with them or something, or even be like, I'm gonna kill you after they like insult his brother or something. I don't think that would be totally out of line or unexpected. So the fact that he doesn't do anything shows, just like once again, it just shows how much grace he has that like Boromir lacked.
Right. Yeah, and grace is the perfect word for it. I think that watching him and his kind of company there be ruthlessly competent, but also always do the right thing is like immensely satisfying as a reader. I mean, like, it's really uncomfortable reading from Frodo and Sam's perspective because you feel their anxieties. But when all is revealed and everything still goes well and everybody does exactly the right thing, it's like, that sense of relief. I don't think, I mean, at this point in the story, things have gone bad and there have been betrayals and bad things have happened often and you can't trust anybody. That's why Frodo and Sam are on their own, because they know, like, anybody could fall to the ring.
Yeah.
But not Faramir.
Not Faramir. Good
Not
guy.
my dude.
Oh, good dude. Yes, so in their conversation about Boromir and Boromir's death and everything, this is also when Faramir mentions that, because he talks about, oh, well, we found out because I was keeping guard or whatever one night, and all of a sudden a boat drifted over. And I was just like, can you imagine that you're on like watch duty or you just go for a walk or whatever on the beach, and then a boat floats up and you're like, oh, cool, a boat. Wow, that's a really nice looking boat. Because it was one of the boats from Lothlorien. So like, It's a beautiful, fancy elf boat. And then you look inside of it and like, not only is there a dead body in it, but it's your brother. And he is dead.
And like you recognize him and
insane.
He's dressed the way you recognize. I love the conversation about the clothes in this, by the way. Like, I recognized his sword. I recognized his gear. Like, that was my brother. Like, and then he's like, oh yeah, also
but
his face.
But I didn't recognize that gold belt. What's up with that?
What was up with that gold
like,
belt?
Oh yeah, we had like a field trip to Lothlorien and the elves gave us hella gifts. It was great.
Everybody got loot. Sometime. We all powered up. It was very good.
Yeah.
And then Faramir is like, and I was like, Boromir, where are you going? And I realized he was full of wounds. And I was like, this is a weird dream. Like, maybe Faramir do something. Like, that's his one mistake is don't catch a weird boat with your brother in it. Like, come on, Faramir.
Yeah, they also wonder, like, how did this happen? Because it's not like, oh, he died and then, like, just magically drifted into a boat and the boat, floated over to us. Like, someone had to do that. Which is why I can't, like, I don't understand why at this point Frodo and Sam aren't like, oh, well, then that means that someone from our group must have survived because they would have put Boromir in the boat to send him off to Gondor. But Frodo and Sam are still like, yeah, that's weird, but it couldn't have been someone from our group because obviously they're all dead. So, I don't know, man. Maybe you had a weird dream and...
Faramir's like, maybe it was a vision, maybe it was a dream, but I never woke up from it. And I'm like, Faramir, you saw your dead brother in a boat. Get the boat, Faramir.
And it's like a weird thing that's a weird thing to just come across. So I can understand why you would be like, this isn't real. Like, life is a computer simulation and I've woken up and that's what is happening right now. Like, that's what would have gone through my mind.
Sure.
Yeah, and then he also asked about the horn that Boromir supposedly has, or did have.
Yeah, the Horn of Gondor.
Yeah, and it was broken. He's like, oh, do you know what happened there? And Frodo says, no, I don't know what happened. And this is when I was like, wow, I can't believe how much happened that Frodo has like zero idea about. There was like an entire battle with the orcs. Boromir died. His best friends, Pippin and Merry, got captured by the orcs and taken off. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas shipped Boromir's body off to Gondor. Then they came across, Gandalf is alive. Like, there's all this stuff that he has zero clue about. He's just like, wow, it's so sad that I'm here by myself with this ring.
I am the only one left, and Sam's still there in the background being like, I'm here too, but I mean...
Yeah. This is going to be a really weird, random reference. So for like maybe the one person out there who understands this, you're great. In the musical Spamalot, which is the musical adaptation of Monty Python's Holy Grail, which is a very funny show. It's a very, very funny show. I highly recommend it. There are definitely bootlegs of it online. Anyway, there's one number where King Arthur it's like he and all of his knights have been split up, and it's just him and his servant Patsy, and he sings this song like, but I'm alone. Oh no, you're not so all alone. I'm here, you twat. And then his servant walks up and like just stands next to him the entire time he's singing this song, and he's just like, what the heck? I'm literally right here.
Right, and everybody spends this whole chapter being like, shut up, Sam, you don't know what you're talking about, you're out of your element. And Sam's like, okay, I guess. But what's great about Sam is that if he were like not Sam, he would shut up. But he's Sam, so he doesn't. So you can't ignore that he's there.
Sam. So after this long interrogation, Faramir decides that, okay, these guys are at least okay in my books for now. You can come with me. We're going to go to our cool secret hideout. And as they're walking, they're talking about, like, I think we were talking about this before we started recording, but there's a lot, because we got on the call and I was like, I'm so sorry that you have to come on for this, like, long chapter where not that much happens. And you were like, yeah, there's a lot of walking and talking. And, like, that's what this is. So, Faramir, he's like, so I can kind of figure that based on, like, context clues, you probably weren't the best of friends with Boromir. And I'm assuming that you didn't exactly leave on good terms. And this is one of those moments where it's kind of, like, a little bit nerve-wracking for them, because they're like, I mean, yes, that's accurate, but please don't kill us or abandon us in the woods. It's just like, Faramir knows a lot more than he lets on, and he's great. He also mentions, is this when it goes into, they talk a lot about Isildur's Bane and this poem, and then he mentions the Grey Pilgrim. And I was like, oh, the Grey Pilgrim, who is that? What? And then he reads off a bunch of other names. And it's Gandalf. Good old Gandalf.
It's Gandalf.
I just like that. I just like how the Gondorians, I don't know.
Yeah, the Gondorians.
I like how their nickname for him is the Grey Pilgrim.
Yeah, but of course Faramir always calls him Mithrandir because Faramir is just such a fancy
very
lad,
fancy,
right?
Yeah, he's like, we're going to speak proper English here, kids. We are not going to he is not Gandalf, it's Mithrandir. And he, once again, Faramir is like a lot smarter than he seems, because when Frodo says, oh, Gandalf is dead, he says, are you sure of this? and that he did not just leave you and depart where he would. And I'm like, Faramir knows where it's at. He knows Gandalf better than I think any of them, because he's like,
with Gandalf, nothing is straightforward.
Yeah.
Like, are like, you sure about that?
There's something else going on here. I'm pretty sure about that. Oh, just love that.
That's a great little moment. And I really like when he's naming off, because I think he's like quoting Gandalf. He's like, yes, I remember he used to.
Yeah, it goes into
like,
italics. Like he's reading off of a poem or something.
And as for the East, I don't go there. So nobody there knows me.
Yeah, it says, many are my names in many countries. Mithrandir among the elves. So it's not even that, like, Faramir is calling him by, like, his original Gondor name or anything. He's calling him what the elves call him. Very fancy.
Very fancy.
Tharkoon, sure, let's go with that, to the dwarves. Aloran I was in my youth in the west, that is forgotten. In the south, Icanis. In the north, Gandalf. To the east, I go not.
I don't go there, so...
Yeah. So they keep talking about Isildur's Bane because Faramir noticed that in their first conversation that Frodo kind of like shied away from that part of the conversation and was like, I'm going to avoid talking about that because obviously we know that's the ring. And this is when, again, Faramir knows a lot. And he's like, I heard a rumor that says that Isildur took somewhat from the hand of the unnamed ere he went away from Gondor, never to be seen among mortal men. And he says, here I thought was the answer to Mithrandir's questioning. And then later on, did I think of Isildur's Bane as being the same thing? So he's like connecting the pieces. He's like, I heard this rumor that he took something from Sauron. And I think that thing is Isildur's Bane. And Frodo's probably like holding the ring in his pocket like, that's weird. What a weird thing. Definitely not that. What a weird rumor.
Yeah, it's a big, scary weapon. Vague weapon, and it's not a ring, let me tell you.
Yeah, definitely not a ring. Oh, and then also, this is where we get the description of Boromir that I think is super accurate. It says, I can well believe that Boromir, the proud and fearless, often rash, ever anxious for the victory of Minas Tirith. So I'm like, yep, that's him. That's Boromir.
And it explains perfectly, like, yes, proud, fearless, admirable qualities, but also maybe looking for an easy way to win when there shouldn't be one.
Yeah. So they end this part of the conversation by Faramir asking if he can join them and help them. And then Frodo doesn't answer him, and they continue on their walk.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
well, Frodo's like,
okay.
He really wants to say yes. Mm-hmm. He knows he can't, or he thinks he can't because he's the last one left. Accepting help at this point, could lead to the same problem that the Fellowship had. And if there's too many people, the secret's bound to get out and they're bound to get noticed. So he just like, there's that part of him, I think it's right there in the text where he's like, oh man, my heart of hearts, I love what this guy is saying. He is saying all the right things. He's a nice guy. We can trust him. He could help us. And then he's like, better not.
Yeah, maybe not. It's a little bit too soon.
Right.
We've only known this guy for like a couple hours. Let's know him for at least a couple more before we bring him on board. Oh, also, throughout this chapter, I was like, where is Gollum? Where is he? And then Sam he gets a feeling that, I feel like someone's watching us or following us. And he kind of looks behind him and sees a small dark shape slipping behind a tree trunk. So Gollum is following pretty close behind. So that answered that question. I was like, are we forgetting the fact that like Gollum is our only way into Mordor at this point and you guys just left him behind? I was like, I'm sure that he'll follow anyway, but like, let's think about this a bit.
Right. And like the one shrewd move that Sam makes is be like, well, if they forgot about him, like, I'm not going to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And that's like really smart on Sam's part, because if they stop that whole line of guys and then like capture and maybe kill Gollum, it's over.
It's kind of like when you were in school and the teacher forgets to collect the homework.
Yes.
And you don't want to be that kid to be like, hey, forgot to collect our homework. Because then, everyone's going to hate you. It's like, okay, if I'm not going to bring it up, you're not going to bring it up.
What's great about that metaphor is that Sam doesn't even like Gollum, and this is his chance to get rid of him, but he's like, no, I can't ruin it. Like, I can't.
Yeah. He's like, it's too good right now. We have it pretty good. So then they reach the part where they need to be blindfolded so that they can have the way into their like hideout hidden. Faramir's like, hey, we need to blindfold you. And Frodo's like, it's not the first time. And so they're blindfolded.
I've seen my share of secret layers, guys.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I just like it's just all these reminders that like the hobbits are almost kind of like children because they're being led. It says that they blindfolded them, then quickly they took each one by the hand and went on their way. So they're like walking, holding hands. And then there are some points where like the terrain is really uneven or rough and the hobbits can't go on. And they were lifted from their feet for a while and then set down again. So
I really like Faramir's instructions to his men. Like, hey, these are my honored guests. Blindfold them nicely. Don't tie their hands. I trust them a little. Heck, you could even ask them to close their eyes, but, everybody opens their eyes when they stumble, so we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Like, just a funny little moment of, like, how careful he wants this treatment to be.
He's like, you're getting the royal treatment here by being gently blindfolded only. So then the blindfolds are removed, and it says, and this is where I will need your help in a second, because I'm confused and I have questions. So,
okay.
They stood on a wet floor of polished stone, the doorstep, as it were, of a rough-hewn gate of rock opening dark behind them. But in front, a thin veil of water was hung, so near that Frodo could have put an outstretched arm into it. It faced westward. The level shafts of the setting sun behind beat upon it, and the red light was broken into many flickering beams of ever-changing color. It was as if they stood at the window of some elven tower, curtained with threaded jewels of silver and gold and ruby and sapphire and amethyst, all kindled with an unconsuming fire. So, that was a lot of words for a location that I don't understand.
Okay.
I was like, are they on a mountain? Are they at a waterfall? Are they on a tower? A castle? I was very confused about where they were.
I am lucky because I have the imagery of the film.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
To attach my imagination to. So, it is a waterfall. So that's what the curtain of water is.
Okay.
And they're in kind of an inlet that's kind of like a crack behind the waterfall.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I was like, is it like a cave like hidden behind a waterfall?
Yeah, almost exactly. So right behind there is this long cavern, and then later Faramir is like, yeah, these caverns, they're kind of man-made by like an older civilization. It's dry in here. Isn't that amazing? Anyways, the waterfall comes off of it, makes it really cool. The only way out is through that one entrance or the window.
Yeah, they come in and he's like, this is our safe place for now. Rest. However, bear in mind that the only ways out are the way that we just took you, which you were blindfolded for, and through the window curtain into a deep bowl filled with knives of stone.
Knives of stone.
And it's like, okay, good night. Have a good rest.
Yeah, that was, as usual, this is a little bit of a tonal, confusing thing, because we know Faramir is ultimately good, but here's yet another moment where you're like, can we really trust him?
Oh, yeah.
Because that sounds a bit like a threat.
I was like, is he threatening to, like, throw them out into this, like, pit full of spikes? Like, what is happening here? You're right. It is very confusing, like, tonally speaking.
I will say, not to spoil the next chapter or anything, but this is Chekhov's knife rocks.
Oh, geez.
So, okay. I mean, they're not there for no reason.
See, that's better than I was worried. I'm very angry about Oliphants, because to me it was introduced as like such a non sequitur and having like zero to do with the plot or anything at all. And then I was like, oh my god, I swear to god, if these Oliphants are the Chekhov's gun of Lord of the Rings and they're gonna show up at the end in like the big battle scene, like Frodo is about to die at the hands of Sauron, and then all of a sudden Sauron is crushed by an elephant foot. I was like, if that's how this series ends, I will scream, and I just hope it's not. So I'm fine with the Chekhov's pit full of spikes. That's fine by my books. So as they are sleeping, or Frodo falls asleep immediately, which is pretty standard for him. Sam pretends like he's sleeping, so because one, he doesn't really trust everyone around him, and two, he wants to kind of spy and listen on their conversations to try and gain whatever information he can. And there's one person who comes up who is on like watch duty, and he says that he saw something a little strange, and I was like, oh, it's Gollum. And then Sure enough, I love this description. It says, "It was a black squirrel, and I saw no tail. 'Twas like a shadow on the ground, and it whisked behind a tree trunk when I drew nigh. I thought I heard the thing hiss at me from above as I turned away. A large squirrel, maybe." And I'm like, that's amazing.
Just like probably a big
squirrel.
I mean, I didn't see a tail, but you know how big things get in like Mirkwood or whatever. It's probably just one of those.
Yeah, it's just a large, creepy, hissing squirrel. That's normal.
It hissed at me, but I thought, better not do anything about it.
And Faramir says, like, "'Tis an ill omen," which, is an understatement.
Yeah.
So just
These guys are not prepared for Gollum.
So just another reminder that Gollum is not far from where they are. So then they sit down to eat food. They are such hobbits at this feast. It says, "Neither Frodo nor Sam refused anything that was offered, nor a second, nor indeed a third helping."
Oh my god.
Such hobbits.
I really like the description of how the tables got set up too. Like they were light tables that came off the walls, and like everything just converted to mealtime. And that was a fun little detail they threw in. It wasn't like, they went to a nicely appointed dining hall. It's like, no, every space is multi-use in this cave.
Yeah. I also like how they're all assembling and gathering together again after there was this big battle. Faramir's like the dad who's like, no matter what happens, we sit down each day to have dinner together as a family. It's like, oh yeah, I killed like 20 people. It was crazy. Also, I got my hand chopped off by an orc. Isn't that nuts? Anyway, can you pass the bread?
Yeah, whatever. Dinner, man.
Yeah.
Gotta have it. And there is that really good solemn moment where they all turn towards Gondor and have that moment of silence.
Yes.
They are not forgetting what they're out there to do, even as they fight and die and suffer, which is, wow. Like, that's a great moment.
And Frodo and Sam are like, they're good guests because at first they're kind of like, wait, what's happening? Because everyone like stood up and turned in one direction and was quiet, and they're like, what's going on? And Faramir's like, is this not your custom? And they're like, no, but it is our custom since we are your guests. And so they're nice guests and they do that.
That's great.
So after the meal, they once again start talking. Faramir's like, okay, so I've only heard a couple like mentions of Gandalf died in Moria. You guys went to Lothlorien. My brother died at some point. Let's talk about your journey and what's happened, because it sounds like it's a wild ride. And Frodo tells this and talks about what's happened. As they're talking about Moria and how Boromir fought and stuff like that, Faramir says, maybe it would have been better had Boromir fallen there with Mithrandir. And then I like this. Frodo says, maybe, but tell me of your own fortunes. So I love he's like,
yikes.
Yeah, maybe it would have been better if he had died then. You're right, yeah. So anyway, enough about me. Yeah, because then
he couldn't have let us down. Yeah, yikes. Bit of a yikes.
Yeah. Then Faramir goes into, because Frodo is like, but we've talked all about us. Tell us about you and your land and your people. And Faramir tells him everything. There is like a solid 2 pages of history of Gondor and Rohan and this like alliance partnership that they forged over the years and all this stuff. And like, this is so much information. It's much more than any of us asked for.
Yeah, and to be honest, being mostly a movie fan, this whole thing about how Rohan was, they were these wilder men from elsewhere that they formed this pact with and then ceded some lands to, and now they have this really close special relationship as two different peoples, but like they're one and they're all from the same line. Like, it's cool, but like it does come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's important because Rohan and Gondor are the oldest of allies, and they should be there for each other, and they haven't been lately. And I think Faramir knows that, and talking about Rohan and Good Light kind of sets him up for more of that later.
I was gonna say, I feel like Aragorn and Faramir are two really good guys, and how they teamed up with the Theoden. That's his name.
Yeah.
Who's the other guy? Eomer. That's his name. Like, there's a lot of good people now from Rohan that we've met, and like Aragorn's been with it. Like, I feel like once Aragorn and Faramir meet, it's gonna be like a match made in heaven, and they're gonna like put their rings together like they're in the like Justice League.
Fire! Wind! Water! Heart! Go planet!
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet!
And it's gonna be like the best alliance ever, and then they're gonna go to battle, and it's gonna be amazing and beautiful.
Honestly, getting the good guys who know what they're doing together and fixing the problems is like, it would be such a satisfying conclusion. I don't know if that's gonna happen exactly how you think.
I'm sure it won't.
but like, you could see how it could.
That's always the trick. You just gotta get the good guys that know what they're doing in the same room. That's the key.
That's the real key. And watching them not be in the same room is like torture. It's crazy.
Yeah. So they talk about Galadriel and Lorien, and Faramir describes her as perilously fair. And I was like, that's an amazing phrase. I love that. And
it's
like,
very good.
Again, Faramir showing that he is very smart and very aware, because Sam is like, what do you mean perilous? And it's like, he's like, are you kidding me? Galadriel is like full of dangerous potential. She could kill every last one of us easily, but she's also fair. So yeah. And I love, it's so good.
It's a great phrase. And Sam is like, I gotta defend her though. Like, nobody's gonna talk down about my Galadriel.
It's a good thing Gimli isn't there, because he would have like killed Faramir. He would have been like, how dare you? That's my girlfriend.
So Sam is like, I'm bad at poetry. I wish I could do a song about her.
Yeah.
And then he tries and it's bad. And you're like, oh, Sam.
Oh, Sam, no.
And Faramir kind of gives him a knowing look and is like, yeah, she must be great.
Yeah, sounds
if those are the words you use, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so they are kind of getting towards the end of their story and their journey, and Sam is like in the middle of talking about like what Boromir did when he was in the presence of the ring, and he was like, now and then he stops, and Faramir is like, Boromir what? And this is when the truth comes out.
Right. That
Boromir tried to take the ring from Frodo, and he was overcome with this evil temptation and turned bad for a hot second, like right before he died. Frodo's mad at Sam and is like, Sam, what?
How could you? How could you ruin this for us?
This. Sam says, save me. and then he's like, oh, there I go again. Whenever you open your big mouth, you put your foot in it, the gaffer used to say to me, and right enough, oh dear, oh dear. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Sam.
Yeah, Sam. Jeez.
And this was when I realized that, to me, Sam is like the child in a group of, when you're watching like a zombie apocalypse survival movie, Sam is the kid that everyone has to make sure survives and doesn't get killed, but they all hate him. And I'm like, Sam for people who watch The Walking Dead, Sam is Carl to me.
That's funny.
Which is a very big insult, by the way. Cause
Yes, I can hear the venom dripping.
For people who don't watch aren't familiar with The Walking Dead, Carl's like notoriously one of the most hated characters, even though he's the son of the main character. And it's
because Sam's always going and getting himself in trouble that he doesn't need to be
it's
in.
like, how could you hate an 11-year-old boy in this? And it's like, because he causes so much like needless trouble and distress for the group. And like right now I'm getting some real hard Carl vibes from Sam. And I'm like, Carl! But very luckily for them, Faramir is real chill with it.
Yeah, he's like, oh, the One Ring. Wow. Really, you two?
Who would have thought? Not me.
Well, you guys have a big responsibility. Anyways, good night.
Yeah, and he's also kind of like, because he's dropped all, like we've mentioned, he's dropped all of these hints about when he's talking about Boromir, that he's very aware that Boromir isn't exactly the greatest. So when they bring up that Boromir was overcome by temptation for the ring, he's not really surprised. He's like, yeah, that checks out. And he once again has a moment to be like, yeah, that's like a really hard thing to have to avoid and not give into. My brother was a strong man, so that temptation must have been really strong if he gave into it, but I'm not going to ever. And he's like, I know it's easier said than done, but I'm never going to give into that desire for this ring.
And that's when Faramir goes from, hey, you're a pretty chill dude, to, wow, Faramir, you are the best person in Middle-earth. Like, go you.
He's great. He's very self-aware. Like, he understands, like, he's saying all these things about, like, oh, I would never give in to that ring. And because he's very aware of the fact that you can talk all you want about, like, oh, no, I would be a brave soldier and I would do this and I would do that. But he knows that there are a lot of things that you encounter in life that you simply like can't prepare for. And, oh, I'm wise enough to know that there are some perils from which a man must flee. So doesn't give like Boromir a hard time because he knows that like it's reasonable that something like this could have happened.
And he knows that some things are beyond him. You know, for all of his strength. There are just some things he won't be able to do.
That he can't control, right?
And he is blown away that the hobbits are going to do it.
Yeah, he says, I marvel at you to keep it hid. Oh, this is also kind of... So he says, I marvel at you to keep it hid and not to use it. And it's like, well... But yeah, he's very
just once
surprised.
In a while,
he's very surprised that they have this very, like, mighty, powerful, evil ring. And he's like, really? You children? He's like, up until, 5 hours ago, I thought halflings were fictional creatures in children's stories. Yeah. And here you are in front of me with Isildur's Bane, and you're not evil people. And you're not using it for evil. That's insane. Then Frodo, this is when he says, like, well, our plan right now is to go into Mordor and destroy this ring somehow. And kind of like really sadly, and he says, I do not think I shall ever get there. And then at one point he was like so overcome with what they were talking about. Oh, it was when Sam revealed that they had the ring. He was like petrified and terrified. And so like all that adrenaline kind of has worn off, and he's also exhausted. So he just kind of like collapses over, and Faramir catches him and then and puts him into bed and is like, good night, little hobbit.
And as usual, we have a chapter ending on falling asleep.
Yes. It's Tolkien ends a lot of chapters that way.
Yeah. And the next chapter picks up with They Wake Up.
They wake up, yeah. So, do you have any final thoughts or about that chapter, or anything we didn't get to talk about or mention?
I just hope that by talking about how great like this little cat and mouse game that Frodo and Faramir play, and talking about how great we think Faramir is, that now this chapter is a little less walk and talk and a little more like, yeah, this kind of rocked. on your end.
Yeah.
I hope I saved it a little.
You definitely hyped up Faramir a lot and made me see, like, I was already in the camp of, like, because I had this notion just based off of, like, there have been some people who are joining the Facebook group, and one of the questions is, what is your favorite character? A lot of people have said Faramir, and so just, like, things like that I've gleaned off from the fandom to be like, oh, Faramir is a good guy. So I've already had that impression going into this, but, like, hearing you talk about him, like, he could be the next king of Gondor if Gondor had a king.
Gondor needs no king. We know this.
It's just so funny to me that, like, I hated Boromir so much, and I really like Faramir a lot.
Yeah, and they feel in many ways like two sides of the same coin. Like, Faramir is just a hair's breadth away from Boromir, but it's those little differences that turn those same qualities into something truly admirable instead of kind of the jerk that you tolerate because he's powerful, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do have to say, though, that if I wasn't doing the podcast, I feel like this would, like, if I was just reading the books on my own time, I feel like I would stop here. I feel like I wouldn't,
Really?
I might not have even read this chapter.
Wow.
Yeah, especially the point where Faramir was just going on and on about the history of Gondor and Rohan.
Okay, yeah, you can skip those pages.
Oh my gosh, it was getting endless, and I was like, I'm forging on because I know that this gets better. And also, I'm a little worried now because I'm holding Return of the King up in my head as being, like, the coolest book in the world, and being this, like, epic conclusion to this thrilling trilogy, even though it's not a trilogy, it's one book. I know, but, like, so I'm kind of worried that Return of the King isn't going to be as good as I'm hoping it is. But I'm like, these people wouldn't have, like, Lord of the Rings wouldn't have such a legacy if it didn't get better from here. So,
oh yeah,
that's the only thing that knowledge, and then also the fact that I have to do a podcast on it is what's keeping me going.
You have made this commitment. Now you must see it through.
I know, yeah, it is true. I'm like, well, I mean, I am more than halfway through. So, like, I might as well just keep going, but...
You've got to take this ring all the way to Mordor.
This is true, yeah. It's like, I'll put it this way. If I was Frodo at this point, I would give the ring to Faramir and be like, you deal with this, I'm done.
You cannot offer me such a thing, Frodo. Yeah. That, no way.
Well, yeah, so that brings us to the end of this episode. Buddy, what would you like to share with our audience?
Okay, so we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but I actually do 4 podcasts now with my best friend and co-host, Alice White.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't think I knew that you guys had so many projects going on.
Yeah, it all started with Those Happy Places, which is the podcast that treats theme parks, rides, and attractions like literature. And that's our main show, and it really is, like, the special one for us. Like, we take that show very, very seriously. You can listen to that at thosehappyplaces.com or anywhere that podcasts are found. So just type it into your podcatcher. We're out there. And then we did The Joust, which is now over, but there might be more Joust content coming along very soon. So you can listen to that at thejoustpodcast.com. And I am very pleased to announce on this podcast that I am helping Alice revive an old podcast of hers that kind of took an extended, unintended hiatus. And that podcast is called Rogue Fun, a Podcast Story, which is all about the Star Wars film Rogue One, a Star Wars Story. And we do that movie one scene at a time, once a month. So the next episode is coming out in March this month, and we are starting from where the podcast left off. So I am the new co-host of that. Very exciting. And I've also got a podcast called Giving the Gift of Murder. And that is a show about creating a extremely elaborate murder mystery party for a friend of mine that contacted me and was like, I know we haven't spoken in a long time, but I need you to do something for me. I want to die on my own birthday at this murder mystery party. And I was like, okay. So I am the spooky ghost butler host of that, along with my other co-host, Sarah Starling. And that one is a lot of fun, and we're just really starting to ramp that one up. So again, it's called Giving the Gift of Murder, and wow, that's a lot of podcasts, but I'm very proud of all of them.
No, that's all such fun stuff. Listeners, check the description. I will make sure to leave links to all of that there. And then also, what is something that you as a Lord of the Rings fan would recommend to other Lord of the Rings fans, whether it's a TV show, a movie, a book? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like related to Lord of the Rings, but just something that like you think other like-minded people would enjoy.
Oh, heck, that's one heck of a question, actually. Let's see. Okay, so if you are a fan of classic literature, I am listening to this podcast that has just started up, and I am not a part of it, so this is just a real I'm listening to it and like it endorsement. It's called Hit the Bricks. It's an audio drama set in the world of Wizard of Oz. And it's beautiful, wonderfully voice acted, amazingly sound designed, and there's original music that runs through the entire thing that is so emotionally stirring. Not to mention the story is updated for a new era and deals with some really heavy stuff, but in a really interesting way. I love what I've heard of Hit the Bricks, and I think everybody out there should give it a listen.
I'm literally looking this up as we speak. That sounds great. As long as there aren't any flying monkeys, I'm in.
As of episode 1, there were no flying monkeys, but
Awesome.
There were, like, what were they? They were wooden gargoyles.
Okay, that I can deal with.
Okay.
Yeah, I was traumatized by the flying monkeys at the age of 5.
Oh, big same.
So.
Yeah, definitely. And the trees, too. The scary trees.
Oh my gosh, like what the heck? That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WB&E. You can learn more about the network by going to wbne.org. And might I suggest listening to Sincerely Us, only the greatest podcast out there for casual musical theater fans. Also, they just did an interview with the writer of The Lightning Thief, which is Becca's favorite musical. So make sure to go check that out. And you can also hear more about it now.
Dear listener, today's going to be a good day, and here's why.
Because today, you're about to find your new favorite theater podcast. I'm Becca.
And I'm Eni, and we're the host of Sincerely Us, a podcast for the casual musical theater fan. And when we say casual, we mean casual.
We don't know every show in existence, and we don't pretend to.
Our show is mostly about how perfect Jeremy Jordan is.
And what we would do if we met Lin-Manuel Miranda on the street.
I would be unable to move or form words.
This is a show for theater nerds, by theater nerds. Every Wednesday on WB&E.
Sincerely Us.
You're gonna have to get used to that shtick. We use it every single episode.
The cover is by Graphite, aka Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod. And the Facebook group. Join the Facebook group. It's fun times in there. You can find me on Twitter at MCWattsUp and Instagram MCTurnDownForWhat. The sponsor of this week's episode is Johan Gilholt. Oh my gosh, Johan, this is like the second time that I don't know how to say your last name, and I'm so sorry for it because you're my wonderful sponsor for this week. I'm going to message you and ask you how to say your last name because I don't know how to do that. If you want to be a sponsor of an episode and get a shout out like Johan, you can go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod. So our quote unquote discussion question for this week is, if there was a fictional character that you could meet the brother of, what fictional character would you want that to be? Who do you want to meet the brother of?
This is an oddly prescient question.
Theoretically, the better brother, the better half. So
right, the not the evil twin brother or whatever, but like, oh, it's this guy's brother and he's even cooler.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, but I don't know if you want to provide your answer now, buddy, but you can think on that, or you can join in on social media later. So yeah, let me know that question.
Is it cheating to say I want to meet Boromir's brother, Faramir?
That's a great answer. So listeners, share your answer with me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Discord. There are a plethora of ways that we can all converse about this. Yeah, let's meet Faramir. And then some answers to a previous discussion question was a couple weeks ago. I asked, what characters would you want to travel down a narrow secret tunnel with stairs and then more stairs? Casey in our Discord said Groot and Rapunzel. I believe there were a couple people who said Rapunzel, theorizing that, well, her hair glows, so that'll be helpful.
Right. Yeah, and she seems acrobatically sound. Like, she's not going to trip and fall down the stairs and take you with her.
Yeah. Cherry Limes on Instagram said Aragorn and Hermione because I want to make it out. And I was like, that's an A team right there.
Fair enough, yeah.
And then Safwood _ said Dumbledore and Toph. And I was like, that's also an A+ team right there. I think all you need is Toph.
Toph is just opening this cavern up and you're out of there.
I think that's all you need is just Well, originally when I posed this question, I was like, I think I would take Zuko and Toph because Toph could earthbend us out and Zuko could, firebend and light the way. But at the same time, Toph would then finally get her field trip with Zuko.
I'm going with Zuko. What? Everyone else went on a life-changing field trip with Zuko. Now it's my turn.
With that being said, Buddy, do you have any final parting words for the audience?
Yeah, well, mostly just for you, MC. Thank you very much for having me on the show again. It was great to come back to the world of Lord of the Rings. I told you before we started recording, this chapter made me remember why Lord of the Rings is so great and special, and I'm just glad to have been able to yell about it on the internet for a little while. It's very fun.
That's great. Yeah. I'm glad that you were positive and enthusiastic where I was not, so... And that's what I'm talking about.